Thank you. Welcome back. Hope you had a good lunch, good conversations. We're talking about one of my favorite topics, which is leadership, and a couple of very experienced leaders on the stage with me. I want to jump right in. Janet, you have been on the hot seat a bit lately. There's been headlines. Is that hot right now?
Yeah.
There have been headlines about allegations about hiding surplus funds, influencing college surveys. There's been some others. I don't want to spend the whole time on this, but what is your response to those headlines?
Well, I think they were generated by an audit of the Office of the President by the California State Auditor. And it was not complimentary, to say the least. But it was also, in terms of the factual allegations, very inaccurate. So we're in the position now where we've accepted the recommendations of the auditor, which basically go to how we track and present our budget, while disagreeing with how she characterized the underlying situation. And I think my job is to get us through this and to correct the things that need to be corrected, fix the problems, and keep moving the university forward.
Mm-hmm. And given that this is an audience of your peers, what is your advice to them if they ever find themselves in this kind of situation?
Well, I think, I hope that many of you don't have the experience of, that I'm undergoing right now. But, I think that you need to work with the auditor. You need to address whatever recommendations come out of the audit, embrace them, and say, not only will we do that, but we'll do even more. So, and give yourself time in which to do that, and be very public about how you're doing it. For example, we actually put up a web page on our work plan in response to the audit, so people can track all of the different things we're doing and the timeline that we're on.
Okay. Your resume includes Governor of Arizona, Secretary of Homeland Security, and President of the University of California System. Please rank them in order of difficulty.
Yeah. It depends on the day, but and there's such different roles. But I would say that running a large public research university system is amongst the most complicated and challenging jobs around today.
Mm-hmm. Do you like hard jobs? I mean, I'm just curious, like what drives you to go after these jobs that you kind of know are going to be difficult?
I think it's mission. I mean, I think it's what you think you can accomplish and who you can help. And, the notion to me of educating the next generation was very, in a way, empowering. You want to do the best you can for the most people you can. So whether you're governor of a state, leading a large federal department, or running a large public university, it takes a lot of energy, and you have to be energized ultimately by the mission.
Right, that's great. Now, Nancy, you're stepping down at the end of the month?
That's why I'm smiling.
That's right. That's right.
It is bittersweet. I am so frustrated over transition, but
right.
Yes, it's time. Timing is everything.
And after how many years in leadership roles?
8 human years multiplied by dog years. It's 8. And I was saying to Janet, I read somewhere our tenure is about 2.5 years, which trumps the urban superintendency as a. So for us, Janet, you're in your 4th, finishing your 4th. This is really. This is good.
Yeah.
This is good.
Yeah.
We're hanging in there.
We've outlasted the norm.
Right. So, I mean, given that you're stepping down, you can be as candid as you want.
No, I can't. Let's get that straight.
We'll just put this on a time lag, the tape. No, but I'd love to hear your reflections on some of the sort of memos to self that you've written, insights about leadership, running an institution, again, that would be applicable for everybody in this audience. Another way to think about it is sort of, what are the do's and don'ts if you were to give people advice on, who are just getting into these roles?
Well, I've often conceded that I do still go to bookstores, and when I go, I sort of go to the self-help, like more diet books than cookbooks, that kind of thing. And I love the leadership literature, I really do. I'm a Jim Collins, I mean, I could move on, but I've read all the little books on different techniques to leadership, and since I've been in a large state university and grew up in a flagship land grant, and then a second tier University of Cincinnati always had to reconcile itself to the Ohio State University. But these are nice opportunities, and I have over the years tried to, and I don't want to be too funky about this, but I have a theory of leadership. And it's pretty easy in the sense that I do think vision really, 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 really matters. I used to say vision trumps everything, but I need a new middle word. Vision eclipses everything, but my big lesson was in the Wisconsin system. I love the Wisconsin idea. I followed closely, whether Scott Walker liked the Wisconsin idea, but it was so galvanizing, not just for Madison, but for all of us. And so I think articulating the vision, and the 5 or 6 SUNYites who are in the audience can validate whether they know we have a system-wide vision. That would be a good test. Don't speak now. And then I think it's not Evita Peron on the balcony. You have to have that vision really crafted at the hands of many. We have a very clear governance structure at SUNY. We have faculty representation on our board of trustees and student leader representation. The student can vote. So vision at the hands of many that weaves its way into very clear and measurable actions. We were saying earlier that evidence-based, database, and evidence
database.
Thank you, Janet.
And evidence-driven decision making.
There you go. And with that, you can get investment because people can see the return on investment. So if I were an incoming president or chancellor, I would kind of work hard at what is my personal theory of leadership. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I have this little email that I wrote when I joined Cincinnati, which was like day 1, week 1, month 1. Because how you start and what you say, which probably isn't, here's my personal vision, because I just said at the hands of many, but who you talk to, I can remember in Cincinnati calling up the governor and saying, hi, I'm your new president. I mean, it's silly in a way, but it's so important. And a good start can't be made up later. It simply can't. And I always felt like if you say, well, what are you going to do first? Well, I'm going to listen. Yes, that would be wise. But what I said at SUNY is I'm going to go visit every campus. I had no idea. 95 days later, and I don't know how many thousands of miles, I did it, which can't be really replicated, and I certainly didn't advise my successor, why don't you go say I'm going to visit every campus, because they'll go, oh God, here we go again. So she probably won't in that way, but for me, that was a listening tour of some sort, and it really helped us frame that vision that we ultimately crafted pretty much together.
What about you, Janet? What are your do's and don'ts?
Well, I agree with Nancy. I think when you start, getting well informed by people on the ground and getting a sense of different aspects of a system. So, for example, we have 10 campuses, 9 of whom take undergraduates. UCSF only takes graduates. But I spent a good day and a half on each campus, and I met with faculty, I met with students, I met with staff, and really got those inputs. And they helped inform some of the major system-wide initiatives that we would undertake. And then you have to design kind of, well, how are you going to roll those out? And what's the rhythm going to be? How are you going to keep your board informed and participatory in that, and make sure that they agree with how you are effectuating your vision? And how do you keep people energized around it? And so the challenge over time is, after you get through that initial period and that initial excitement and you roll out your initial initiatives, well, how do you sustain that and keep, keep fuel in the fire? Now we're 4 years in, and we had a big transfer initiative. We had a big innovation and entrepreneurship initiative. We have a big carbon neutrality initiative. So being able to put milestones on each of those so people can see the progress that's being made, I think that's a way to keep a system together and to keep it moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And on that point, I mean, one of the things that has always struck me about leadership and why it's so hard, it's just a series of paradoxes, just opposing forces in balance. And as I think about your jobs, I think there's a real paradox as a leader where you're trying to strike the balance between urgency and patience. And so how do each of you think about that? Because if you create too much urgency, you don't bring people along, then you're going to lose them.
Yeah.
But you can't be too patient. So how do you?
Well, I thought it was good. I said to Janet, I think that Larry Summers was a nice bookend for this conversation, because I thought particularly less shouting and more of whatever the opposite of that is. Okay. But we are not in a command and control environment. In fact, I don't even think corporate America is as command and control as they like to act like. We do live by committee. And people criticize that. What are you going to do? Form a committee? That's exactly what I'm going to do, because that's how we make decisions with key stakeholders. But every year I give a State of the University address. I was just sort of mimicking the governor. We wait to see what he has to say, and then there's still empty seats. It's not standing room only yet. We've not moved to the convention center, but it's a principle of the thing. We get to say once a year, this is really big. And I try to offer up some surprises in that State of the Union, just to keep everybody on their toes, but always knowing that we've got to go back to the committee, to the shared governance, to the input of all the stakeholders inside and out. And that, I think, is the yin and yang and the balance. You've got to be visionary. I mean, don't you think people expect you to say a little out-of-the-box stuff once in a while, and then try to live through it and get people to those outcomes that you said are so important?
Right. And so the concept of shared governance was a little bit mysterious to me coming out of being a secretary and being a governor. And I was, well, what is this shared governance? But I realized that it is now an important part of the chemistry and the ecosystem of higher education. And it's that back and forth and that engagement that really is so important, and ideally informs better decision making all the way around.
Right. So back to the hot seat question. There's the issue of free speech has come up in a number of discussions today, and when I was doing some research on you, I came across this first sentence in a story. It said, Janet Napolitano has got a new nightmare on her hands. This one is about Milo Yiannopoulos, and then there's the Ann Coulter thing. So how do you think about that, the issue?
Well, I think that universities are caught in a paradox. We obviously believe in free speech. It is an absolute touchstone of who we are. But we also have an obligation to protect the safety and security of our students and our faculty and our staff. And so what do you do when you have a proposed speaker that raises security concerns, also for the speaker, him or herself? In my view, you have to allow the speaking to occur and plan the security around it. And that can mean absorbing a lot of costs on behalf of the university. The recent Ann Coulter non-appearance, but we didn't know whether she was going to ultimately appear or non-appear, cost UC Berkeley several hundreds of thousands of dollars because of the intel that said that if she spoke, there would be a real protest that could potentially turn violent based on some earlier protests that had happened in the city of Berkeley and what happened in the aftermath of Milo Yiannopoulos. But I think you have to start with the speaker comes first, the speech comes first, and then build the security around that.
Okay. What is the single hardest part of your job?
It can be anything. On any given day, I think this is the hardest part of my job. Like dealing with Sacramento, this is the hardest part of my job. You know, working with Berkeley on Ann Colt, this is the hardest part of my job. I think these jobs, there is a crisis du jour, and I think maybe the hardest part is dealing with those while you keep the overall vision and keep moving forward on greater systemic initiatives, and making sure that you don't get overly distracted by or succumb to the latest negative press story or the latest, like I said, crisis of the day.
Remember that earlier today, Michael Crow made the distinction between sort of service to the state and being viewed as a government agency. And so I think a lot of our day-to-day blocking and tackling is because we are still not well distinguished from the other, I'm talking public universities now, other operations of a state. And so we're constantly talking about our distinctive nature, which is unique. It's different than the Department of Labor or some other, but still we are public and we serve the state. I really think, given that I block and tackle every day, and you wouldn't, I mean, you could write a book, but then you couldn't publish it, so you can't tell this stuff. But my greatest challenge is trying to say to our sector, higher education, folks, the world is changing. We do not have a system of public education in America. Early childhood is nowhere near connected to K-12, is nowhere near connected to higher ed or to the workforce. And making the case for how this has to flow. And we can't start at grade 13, and we can't finish at 16. And I don't know how many teachers you prepare, but we prepare 5,000 teachers a year. It seems like if the kids arrive at our doors underprepared, we might own some of that. So honestly, what keeps me awake is that driving sense that higher education has to get better in the game. And I mean by that the social, the achievement, the look at ourselves relative to other countries, and educate more people in America. And so that's a sleepless night for me.
Okay. Quick question before we go to the audience. You've chosen your successor, or your successor has been named.
I didn't choose
Yes,
her, but they did a darn good job,
Right,
so I'm
I corrected
thrilled.
myself. So the proverbial envelope that you leave in the drawer with a short note of advice, what is that short note of advice?
Well, let's see, don't talk about shared presidencies. I got a lot of press on that. I didn't want to dissolve the campuses, but I did want them to be more efficient. Right. So the Watertown Gazette lived 2 years longer because of me, and they should thank me for that because they printed all the rumors. I think you have to take the long view. And I would say to Chancellor-elect Christina Johnson, whom you will be thrilled with, this is what I gave my life and soul to. Right. And I think it matters beyond my personal interest. Yeah. And all I want you to do is pick up the thread. Yeah. Do every other wonderful thing you can think about, but please don't let 8 years of hard work die on the vine. And so many new presidents and chancellors are so interested in creating their own thing. I had the great good fortune of coming to SUNY when it needed leadership. It needed the kind of stepping out. But if I had followed, if the reverse were true, my obligation is to build on the shoulders of my predecessor. And even if you don't like them or you don't like exactly what they did, the continuity of leadership is what's going to make us great. Yeah. And that's in my envelope.
Okay. Janet, what would be your short note to your successor?
I think I that's a difficult question because I haven't thought in those terms. But I would say listen more, set a vision, be clear, be strong, and don't lose your sense of humor. Because some days I just go, really? We did what? Really?
We're quite laughable, right?
Yeah, yeah.
On any given day.
That's great. That's great. Audience questions? In the front, please identify yourself. Thank you.
Wim Wiewel, president of Portland State University. Thank you very much. You both have got really tough jobs. In what ways do you feel that American presidents and chancellors are really failing to step up to leadership, either on their campuses or in society at large? Where do you see the biggest shortcoming? Question for both of you.
I defer to the governor, secretary, and
I would defer to experience. I think in recognizing that as leader of a campus, you also lead a community, and you've got to have outreach and connection with community, so that the community will support you when times are difficult, so that the community will support you politically, and being that kind of community presence and advocate. I think it's so easy to be absorbed in campus specific matters that we lose that sense of the greater envelope of support that campuses need.
Vim is a good example of that, so that's a great question.
Yeah, that's great. See a hand up there on the aisle, please.
Hi, my name is Marty Meehan. I'm a relatively new president of the University of Massachusetts, and I'm interested in how you get the chancellors and presidents that work for you to buy into your vision, buy into what you want the campuses to be done. It just seems to me, in a relatively short period of time, that the system head gets all the negativity, and then when something's going great on a campus, you know, it's the president or chancellor on the campus. How do you get your presidents that work for you, or your chancellors that work for you, to be on the same page with you?
You were talking about that earlier.
Well, I've hired 50 presidents. Not that that means they're going to do, but I do it through the Board of Trustees. And so while we're talking about presidents and chancellors, do not underestimate the power of your Board of Trustees for good or ill. And much of what we want to adhere to stick comes through policies developed by and for our Board of Trustees that do not reach the Board of Trustees until they have been widely vetted by all the stakeholders. And then you attach that to some kind of performance. It sounds kind of cut and dry, but trust me, it's a long process. It's a respected process. And I think the my has to go. This is our vision. You helped frame it. You helped frame how we're going to measure it. Now let's get on with it. And the board is there to support and encourage support from the campuses, even in their distinctiveness.
Well, and I would also add that with respect to individual campus leadership buying into a system-wide vision, I mean, that in a way is a negotiation and a participatory exercise, and the basic art of persuasion, i.e. to say this is why it's good for you and your campus that we do this, and this is how the system will support you for your participation, helps to create that sense of, you know, we're in it together.
We did coin this word. I can't get off the stage without saying systemness at least once. And if Groucho Marx were here, the duck would come down, because this is how the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And people, it's not a natural act to collaborate. No. It's an acquired skill.
Great. 2 10-second questions to finish up. Question from the audience. What's next for you, Nancy?
Oh, that's a big unresolved issue, but I do have a faculty appointment at the University at Albany, and I have a great respect for our Rockefeller Institute on government, so I'd like to stay in the policy world. I am scared to death of losing my bully pulpit, so now I've told you all this. I need to stand behind a podium for something because your voice matters, and I've gotten accustomed to using it, and I'm a little suffering from the potential loss.
Great. And President Trump question, Jan, in March, you said that it's still unclear whether the bark is worse than the bite.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that way? What is your?
No, I think we're hearing a lot of barking right now. I think the signals out of Washington are a risk factor for higher education. They're a risk factor in terms of funding for student financial aid, for basic research, and also a risk factor in the sense of public expression of support for what we do and how we do it, and the value of things that we value, like the value of basic research. I think that these are things that, as higher ed leaders, we are going to have to continue to be advocates for, and we've got to build that sense of community around it.
On that note, please join me in thanking Nancy and Janet. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet.